Now, if as an executive communicator your job, either in whole or in part, is to support speakers who give either keynote presentations or just talk to small groups of employees, then you've got to realize that speaking is a high wire act, and Murphy's Law sooner or later will apply, and something will go wrong. And as a professional, you're the one who's ultimately responsible for that. So what I hope to show you in the next hour, using an outline I've got, including the handout that's been passed around of checklists, simple procedures, nothing too complicated, is how you can mitigate the risk if, or not if, but when something goes wrong, because something inevitably will go wrong. And hopefully you'll then be able to limit the career damage that you'll get from those meltdowns. Basically comes down to, like before you flew here, those of you who travel from out of state, you would have expected the pilot in your aeroplane to have gone through a pre-flight checklist. And even though it's the 2000th time they've flown the plane, they still go through the same pre-flight checklist. I think that's a very good practice for corporate communicators to adopt. So what I handed out was a checklist that I've used for the past, I would say about 6 years I started to develop this. There's actually 3 sides to my handout, and the back page I was saving paper is a separate handout, which I'll get to later on. So this handout is a logistical, I heard Rob Friedman, if you're any of you here for pre-conference workshops, talk about this as a scope sheet. I've not actually ever used that term, scope sheet. I just talk about it as a speaker logistics form. It's some logistics and then some more. So I'll quickly go through this. And actually somebody asked me as I was making the handout and passing it around, how did I create this? It's very straightforward. I used Microsoft Word. I inserted a table, and it's a 2-column table. You just add rows as you need them. And I never use this whole checklist. I will tailor it for specific events. For instance, it's got a block on here for press and PR. Well, if it's an internal event, I just delete that block. But I typically begin with this around 4 to 6 weeks before a speaking event. And there's nothing in here that's rocket science. But it's sort of one of these typical routines that if you get into the habit of using, it makes your life easier, and it also mitigates the risk of any meltdowns. And I would like to highlight the first one around travel. I did a search on, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and if you said to your speaker, if the conference organizer said to the speaker, oh, we're in the Hilton Garden Inn by the airport, you might think, oh great, I've got time to go into San Francisco, have a morning meeting, I'm on at 11:45, I'll turn up at 11:30 at the Hilton Garden Inn. And if you hadn't double checked it, you wouldn't realize there are actually 3 Hilton Garden Inns near San Francisco Airport. The cultural risks, what I'm talking about here is primarily cultural diversity. And there's not, both within the US and also between the US and other cultures, there's a lot of risk in using various phrases in your speech or words. A lot of US executives, and probably worldwide, a lot of executives in many, many industries like to pepper their talk, and it gets into their speeches, with sports analogies. This is 4th down and da-da-da-da, or, time out because we want to discuss this, which now I've been in the US 30 years, I get. But if you were an English executive coming to speak in the United States and you started saying, now chaps, we're going to be batting on a sticky wicket. I could explain, it took me 5 minutes to explain what a sticky wicket is and why you shouldn't bat on it, but it's a cricketing term that everybody in England understands, but most people in England do not understand what 4th down is. In terms of risks, once the person's in the room, and I'm going to talk about technology, you need a spare bulb for the projector and that kind of obvious thing, but once you've got somebody onto the podium, and they've got their speech arranged, the biggest risk, like I hinted at with the cultural issue, is saying something that, or having a speech that's not going to carry the audience along, that won't be compelling. I mentioned the tequila drink and how you can mispronounce that. Speech writers especially, though, need to be aware of the risks of certain phrases or words. Now, can somebody please tell me, what is that a picture of?
That's a lorry.
No, you stole my thing. Exactly. In this US, it would be a yellow truck. You could say yellow truck, yellow truck, yellow truck. You could say red truck, yellow truck, red truck, yellow truck. No problem. But an English speaker, this is a famous tongue twister that all second graders learn when they're in England, is that's a yellow lorry. And if you say red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry, you can't say it, right? So a speechwriter should not, for an English, and I was looking into this, I didn't connect with the, maybe it's something they were saying this morning about my lack of brand awareness of GM, but I didn't realize Buick was a GM brand. But apparently in the US, a similar tongue twister would be red Buick, blue Buick. So you wouldn't want to have the speaker with a script that somehow said, and we're pleased to announce our red Buick, see, I can't even say it. So be aware of those kind of phrases. I asked, is Colin in the room? Colin Morehouse? Yes, he's at the back of the room. Another speechwriter friend, Colin Morehouse, who gave a talk yesterday, quoted an example of a speech he heard about, which was given shortly after 9/11 to an after-dinner reception by a dignitary, and the after-dinner reception was to honor first responders, not in New York, but it was a different part of the country, but they were still all very, firefighters from New York, and that whole thing that happened in 9/11 was still on everybody's mind, and the speechwriter had scripted the script to read countless acts of heroism, which was, a very good thing to say about, the brave people in the fire department, or whoever, who'd exhibited countless acts of heroism. But the speaker accidentally said countless acts of terrorism. Because on the TV news, you heard night after night, countless acts of terror, and countless acts just mentally went together with terrorism. The speechwriter should really have anticipated that. Now, the speaker recovered, and a quick apology kind of saved the day. But those kind of alliterative problems that you might have with a yellow lorry, or a catchphrase that could be misconstrued, can occur more frequently than you think. You can catch this as a speechwriter by reading the script aloud yourself. There's a lot that you can learn from this book by Cliff Atkinson. I say the back channel is worth getting and looking through, because he deals with the risks in the world we live in today. You might not, before you came here, know you live in it, but as has been made apparent by Shell Holtz and others, and Mark Ragan himself, and everybody, right? The people at GM, for goodness sake, are saying how much Twitter, who was it, Ellen DeGeneres, is responsible for that auto brand getting known on Twitter. The world of Twitter and social media is fraught with risks. Back in the world of the National Speakers Association, who are not ahead of the curve on this, many of them are the more traditional kind of motivational speakers who like to come out and whip the audience up, and many of them are aghast at this. I don't want my audience, distracted. They should be paying attention to me. I'm the star of the show. Well, they're not going to make it go away unless you somehow disable cell phone connections in the building for the day. So it's going to happen anyway. So Atkinson's advice is, especially this would be a great role for you, for somebody like me in my speechwriting, because I often accompany the executive to the event. I should sit there, in the front row off to one side, monitoring the Twitter comments, if there are any, and if there are and they turn either positive or negative, it would be quite easy to hand the presenter, especially during Q&A, a discreet note, who could open it up and they could say, oh, thanks, my assistant's just noted to me that a couple of you in the audience has been asking, why I said we've seen a 30% rise in sales or something.